Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Firestone. This is also PH 180, day 10 in our quest to understand. I'm coming to you from my favorite restaurant here, McDonald's in Deerfield. Um, I'm not able to be with you today because a conference opportunity came up that I needed to be at. And so here I am putting together this little talk for you on Rene Descartes and his 6 meditations on first philosophy. So I hope the quiz went well for you. Hopefully Barry Baker had a chance to administer that. There were 6 questions on it, so hopefully you guys got some extra credit there. Although it wasn't necessarily the easiest quiz. We will have a chance, however, to go over some of that real quick here with you as I go through the meditations over the next 20 to 30 minutes. So not really sure how long this will take, but hopefully leave us with plenty of time to give you a chance to ask any questions you have to Mr. Baker or to the other TA who may be there as well. Okay, well let's talk a little bit about Rene Descartes. He was trained in Paris, France. He studied philosophy at the university level, and he studied in particular some of the people we've been talking about, Plato and Aristotle, and a lot of philosophy after Plato and Aristotle, which was indebted to him. So if you could leapfrog to the church fathers and someone like Augustine, who's really a Platonist or Neoplatonist in certain ways, and if you jump further to St. Aquinas, he's an Augustinian, but a Christian Augustinian. He has a philosophy with metaphysics as first philosophy. Descartes is studying all these people, and he's also a product of his age. Science is beginning to flourish. He is a mathematician of some repute himself, and he is frustrated that philosophy isn't as sure or as he's not as confident in the findings of philosophy as he is in science and mathematics. So he sets about to use his immense talents in the area of philosophy to try to set it on a firm foundation, to make it as rigorous and as sure-footed as the sciences and as mathematics and so forth. So that's really what we have in the meditations, an attempt of a mathematician, scientist, to do philosophy in such a way that it could be every bit as sure as those disciplines. Now, one thing he knew from his training is that when metaphysics is first philosophy, you get grand philosophical systems. But each one of those systems are coherent, but they don't necessarily jive with one another. They disagree on many of the particulars. And philosophy is languishing in these disagreements about metaphysics when the other sciences seem to be taking off. So Descartes, as you may have looked at in his opening statement in the Meditations, he has an introduction where he says, very interestingly, that he is writing these meditations not for philosophers, but to the theological faculty at the University of Paris, so that they can see how scientific and sure-footed theology can be with a strong philosophical foundation. So he thinks he's done that in these meditations, and he sets about to show them by the type of discourse that we have there. So the other thing to keep in mind is that these meditations take place supposedly over 6 days. And in these 6 days, Descartes comes up with a very famous endgame with regards to the human person. He says that we are minds and we're bodies, that we are some kind of a composite of mental and physical natures. And this, of course, is revolutionary. It becomes dominant in the history of Western thought. It also is a conundrum, as we'll find out. How do the mind and body relate to each other? That all happens at Meditation 6. Interestingly, Descartes creates a vision of the human person in 6 meditations and on day 6. And in the canon of the Western philosophical tradition, it's really, I don't know if it's ironic or what, that Descartes creates a vision of man on day 6, which is, I found to be a remarkable parallel with the biblical narrative where God creates man on the 6th day as well. Okay, well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. What I'd like to do is look at Meditation 1 with you, and hopefully I've been able to get some handouts so that you can follow along with what I'm saying here, and that'll help us. So let's take a look at Meditation 1. As I said before, Descartes is frustrated with the contradictions in philosophy. So what he decides to do is, rather than reason with Augustine or reason with Aquinas, he decides to drop what I call the equivalent of a nuclear bomb in philosophy. That is, he's going to clear the playing field completely by developing what Stephen Palmquist calls his method of doubt. By method of doubt, he means I'm going to doubt everything that I've thought was true before. And we're going to clear the slate. We're going to drive out Augustine and Aquinas and Aristotle and Plato and all of those guys and start afresh by doubting everything. In fact, the doubt is he even tells us in the first meditation that it's going to be even more radical than just doubting them. He's going to doubt that he has eyes or feet or hands. He could be full of any of these things. He's going to doubt all of these things. And he's going to look in the midst of that doubt for some place that he can have sure footing. So this very famously, I guess, makes him a skeptic, or puts him in the skeptical tradition. But he doesn't stay there, because he's going to give us a couple of things, 2, 3, 4 things that he thinks we can know for sure about the world. But before he gets there, he needs an interlocutor. Remember, I told you guys that a good philosopher always has his worst enemy present. That is, he has his objector who's always asking questions of him. Descartes is a good philosopher. He has a great interlocutor or objector present in the meditation, in the first meditation. You guys know who that is. I want you to look over at Barry Baker and tell him who is the main objector to Descartes in the first meditation. Okay, well, that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But if you turn to the last page of meditation number 1, you'll find that the main objector there is an evil demon. He assumes the existence of an evil demon who is trying to fool him at every turn. And this evil demon has immense powers of persuasion and of being able to convince him of things. And so he's going to pretend that that evil demon exists, and that evil demon is capable of tricking him in so many different ways. That's why when he gets to the next meditation, meditation number 2, he will be able to use the strictest reason and sure-footed judgments in order to establish something for certain. Because if an evil demon couldn't fool him of something, that's pretty sure knowledge. So it's a little bit different, right? If we were doing it today, it would be with regards to maybe a supercomputer, as we talked about the last time, or some kind of great scientist who is trying to trick us. Descartes didn't know about computers. He assumed the existence of an evil demon who was trying to trick us at every turn. Now notice, just if you bear with me a little bit here, notice that in this sort of creation account of the human person and what we can know for sure, an evil demon is present. In fact, I would suggest to you that in almost every religious tradition, in its origin stories, there's a demon present. So if you look at Christianity, of course, we have the serpent in the garden. If you look at Islam, there's satanic voices present. If you look at Buddha, there's the goddess of illusion that tries to trick the Buddha, and so forth. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very common. Philosophy is no different. Here, at the very outset of one of philosophy's greatest philosophers, he assumes the existence of an evil demon as he's trying to establish the truth of what he can be certain of. So if we go now over to meditation 2, he has evening and there's morning on the first day. Oh man, let's stretch a little bit. Evening and morning on the first day. You know, each one of these meditations takes one day of thinking, of real hard thinking. Then he goes to sleep and he wakes up. And he wakes up on meditation day 2 and he says, I need to discover something I can be certain of. And he talks about this as the quest for the Archimedean reference point. by the Archimedean reference point, he's thinking about the great story of Archimedes, who was looking for one place in the universe that did not move. And if he could find that one place in the universe that doesn't move, he could move the world. He would essentially be all powerful. So Descartes is on the lookout here in Meditation 2 for the one place in the world, one place in his intellectual life that he could not be fooled of. If he could find such a place, he would then be able to establish philosophy on a firm footing and have the power to develop a philosophy which we could be most certain of. So he's on the quest for certainty in Meditation 2, and he's looking for what I've described and what he describes at the early part of the meditation as its Archimedean reference point. Now he goes through a couple of things. Hopefully we've had a chance in a previous class period to talk about some of the things we think we might be certain of. The first one he talks about is sense perception. Sense perception is something pretty solid. You know, I'm sitting here at this table at McDonald's, and doggone it, these walls look like they're real to us. But as we know from movies like The Matrix, maybe Inception. By the way, Matrix is a better movie than Inception. Just my opinion. You guys can chew that up if you want. And we could be fooled of those things. We're fooled before. You know, when you're driving down the road and you see like what you think is water on the ground, but it's just a hot day, the heat rising. That's another one of these examples of something we could be fooled of, and so forth. I mean, there's lots of times that we can have seen that what we thought we saw, we really didn't see. And so an evil demon could really trick us in these things. So sense perception itself really isn't the Archimedean reference point that we're looking for. He also looks at mathematics or even logic. And those areas, although he thinks they may even be closer to getting at a sure reference point, he still makes mistakes in mathematics and in logic. And what we thought, you know, was the right answer doesn't always turn out to be the right answer. So as much as we think logic and mathematics may fulfill this role, it comes close, but not quite close enough. We need something that we could in no way be fooled of, that would go beyond any possibility of ever being fooled. And this is where he stumbles into, frankly, if you had to put your finger on the single most famous and perhaps most important point in Western philosophical history, you might point to meditation number 2, what's commonly called the cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. He turns to thinking itself and he asks himself, could I be fooled into thinking that I'm thinking? Well, immediately you run into a problem. In order to fool you into thinking that you're thinking, you have to be thinking. So even an evil demon can't fool you into thinking that you're thinking without you actually thinking. Eureka. This is the eureka moment in the history of Western thought, and certainly in Descartes' mind, that he has discovered something that the evil demon could not fool him of, and that is that he is a thinking being. Well, there's evening and there's morning on day 2. He goes to bed and he's just like, man, I can't believe it. I have found the firm foundation that I was looking for to establish philosophy as a science. Problem is, of course, that he wakes up the next morning. He goes, my goodness, I'm a thinking being. Hallelujah, I found that Archimedean reference point. But hold it. I've got ideas in my head. I've got things happening to me all around. Some of these things I can control, like when I pick up my keys here. I can control the fact that I picked up my keys. But if somebody were to throw a Big Mac over there and hit me in the head, I'm not going to be able to control that. So what this tells Descartes is that I'm not alone. In Meditation 3, I have these ideas. Some of them I have control over, seemingly, and others, you know, in my imagination and so forth. But others I have no control over. So how am I going to, what's going on here? I'm not alone. There must be something else in the universe, and this something else is the source of my ideas. That Big Mac comes over and hits me in the head. I didn't see that coming. There must be something else other than just me as a thinking thing. I am not alone. This thing that exists other than me also has to be mental like me. Because if it wasn't like me, it couldn't hit me with the Big Mac. No, it needs to be another mental thing. Otherwise, it couldn't interact with me as a mental thing. You see, in meditation 2, I've established the fact that I am a mental substance. But in meditation 3, I'm not alone, and I seem to be interacting with something. And whatever it is I'm interacting with has to be another mental substance, unless it would not be able to interact with me. It cannot simply be another finite blank mind like my mind. You see, if it's another finite mind, it just begs the question, where did it get its ideas from? It too is a blank slate. It's like two minds interacting, but two minds. There's like the blind leading the blind. They can't account for the kinds and quality of ideas that I have in my mind. You see, some of the ideas I have in my mind are like infinity and perfection and some really extraordinary idea, perfect triangles, for example, that I have in my mind that I have a really hard time recreating in reality. What could account for such perfect ideas? Well, it can't be another finite mind like myself that's prone to mistakes and other things. It has to be an infinite mind. That is the only way that you can account for the quantity and the quality of ideas that I'm being impacted by. The rationalist philosophers after Descartes, really all the way up to Immanuel Kant, called this notion of God the ens realissimum. It's a big fancy word with an itty-bitty meaning. What it means is that God has all possible predicates in his being, and only another mental substance opposite me with those kinds of qualities could impact me in the way I'm being impacted by perfect ideas, by the quantity and quality of ideas that I'm being impacted by. So whatever this mental substance is, this mental being opposite myself in the universe, it has to have infinity and perfection as part of its nature. This, of course, is Descartes' first argument for the existence of God. If we're going to have experience of things of this quality and this quantity, it has to be because another mental being exists who has the kind of predication in its very nature that makes this possible. That's the first argument for God's existence. God is an infinite mental substance, just as I am a finite mental substance. And there's evening and there's morning on meditation 3. Well, Descartes wakes up on day 4, and he has a real extraordinary sense of satisfaction. You see, he's no longer the doubter that he once was. He's got two things that exist in his universe. Number 1, himself as a thinking thing. Number 2, God as an infinite thinking thing. And those two things he has proven in meditation 2 and meditation 3. Now, he wakes up on meditation 4 and he says, hold on a second. I have to be careful. I have more than one idea in my universe. God now exists. I call this one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Have we moved too quickly? Well, Descartes decides that no, we haven't really moved too quickly. It's hard to, most people skip over meditation 4 very quickly because there's nothing really satisfying there in terms of new discoveries. But I beg to differ. When I look at meditation 4, I see the most important meditation in the entire book. You see, he had doubt in meditation 1. He had the existence of himself as a mental substance in meditation 2. He had the existence of God in meditation 3. In meditation 4, he asks himself, have I moved too quickly? Is reason reliable? Can I really establish philosophy on a firm foundation using my intellect alone? In a very famous passage, I'm going to have Barry Baker show that to you when this is over. A very famous passage at the near the middle or end of Meditation 4. Rene Descartes says, yes, I can trust my judgment if I use my reason wisely and carefully. A disciplined judgment is the human being's greatest perfection. In Meditation 4, we have Descartes establishing reason as the ultimate adjudicator of truth. And if you use human reason carefully, and you don't illogically or too quickly use it, if you don't unethically use it, but if you're just careful, you hold back your will, and you just try to have a disciplined judgment, you can prove everything that's necessary for the human being to know about the world. This is a huge moment in the history of Western thought. You see, in Meditation 4, the age of reason is established. From Descartes, really all the way up through Kant, you have the modern period. Embedded in the modern period is a period called the Enlightenment, where reason is ruling the day. And there's science begins to flourish and begins to challenge religion, and in Christianity for that matter, for the intellectual allegiance of the Western thinker. So we have Descartes and the dawn of the age of reason in Meditation 4. Meditations 5 and 6 are rather interesting. I'm going to go ahead and show you a little chart here. I'm not totally sure how well it'll come off in these pictures, but here's the chart. You hopefully can see here that we have an hourglass-shaped structure. I don't know if Barry can put this on the board or what have you, but in this hourglass-shaped structure, you can see in Meditation 1, the method of doubt is established. In Meditation 2, the self as a thinking thing, a mental substance, is established. In Meditation 3, the existence of God. Then right in the middle there, you get the question, can I trust my judgment? And his answer is yes. Yes, you can. If you're careful in how you use it and you're disciplined and so forth, you can trust your judgment. And now the dawn of the age of reason begins. In Meditations 5 and 6, you get almost like a mirrored argument there, if you notice, where God, another argument for the existence of God, it happens in Meditation 5, and then another argument for the nature of the human person, or the self, in Meditation 6. So I'll go ahead and pull that down now. So in Meditation 5, Descartes raises the question of, hold on a second. I've got the existence of myself as a mental substance, and I have the existence of God as a mental substance. But there's something about my experiences that makes them stand out. I'm going to call that the property of extension. That they don't seem to be merely in my head, they seem to be external objects that stand out in nature. Now, how do I account for such things? Well, God is not a deceiver. God wouldn't trick us. And if God wouldn't trick us, there must be something about this property of extension that's trustworthy. In fact, the property of extension must be part of God's very nature, that he has somehow is rooted in God's nature. And so we have this second proof for the existence of God, where the property of extension becomes an aspect of his very nature. God has all possible predicates. He wouldn't fool us. God moves from being a thinking thing to what I call a thing that thinks. That is, God has buried within his nature being itself and the very property of extension that he can then attribute to other things. So we have the second proof of the existence of God, and really it's just an enhancement, if you will, of Meditation 3. It's the recognition that there's something more going on than mere ideas in our head. There seems to be things that stand out. By the time we get to Meditation 6, because the property of extension is in God's nature, it might also be a property of us. Because if we have a clear and distinct idea of ourselves and of nature, and God wouldn't trick us, In Meditation 6, Descartes says that nature must therefore exist. And one of the aspects of nature that must exist, because God's not a deceiver, is our own bodies. What could be more, I'll put this in front of you guys, what could be more sure than the existence of my own hands and my own legs and the extension of my own body? You see, I can move these things. Other objects seem to be sure, because God wouldn't trick us of this table or these keys. He wouldn't trick us of these things because, as Descartes puts it, deceiving is a weakness. God doesn't have to deceive because he's infinite and he's perfect. We've already proven that in Meditation 2. So if he's infinite and perfect, and we have clear and distinct ideas of the external nature, he's not going to fool us at these things. So the external world exists, nature exists, but part of that is also the extension of my own body. So in Meditation 6, he is able to get to the existence of the body as well as the existence of the mind. We exist not only as minds or mental substance, but also as bodies, or what he calls extended mental substances. So we have these two things, minds and bodies, that exist that make up the human person. This becomes a classic problem in contemporary philosophy, and it's one that we're still dealing with today. If you ever want to make money as a philosopher, you need to stay in two areas, really. One area is in the mind-body problem, because lots of scientists and philosophers continue to work in that problem. And the other is the problem of evil. Because of international conflicts, terrorism, and various other things, the problem of evil remains on the forefront of people's minds. So if you want to get a grant or make some money in the area of philosophy, stay in one of those two areas, because that's one of the few places that you don't have to languish as a philosopher. I mean, you guys have heard the old joke about how do you know you have a philosopher at the front door, right? You pay him for the pizza. Unless, of course, he's studying the mind-body problem or the problem of evil. Then he's got enough money, okay? Anyway, so in this case, the mind-body nature of the human person is established, but it's established at a cost. And the cost is, how do minds and bodies relate to each other? So you see, I can hold my hand up here, and I can think about it moving, but it's not moving. Now I can hold my hand up here and think about it moving and move it. What's the difference between those two things? How did the mind make the body move? In one case, it was thinking about it, but it wasn't happening. In another case, it made it happen. René Descartes had a fairly famous solution to this problem. He thought there was a gland in the back of the neck called the pineal gland, and that the ideas in the mind wind up and they strike the pineal gland, and it makes your body move, and so forth. That has not survived close scrutiny, and there continues to be a lot of work done on how to solve that problem. Yeah, I think you see maybe 6 solutions to that problem in Stephen Palmquist's chapter on Descartes. Okay, well, that is basically a blitzkrieg through the meditations. Hopefully they're useful to you. Hopefully I can put this video maybe up on Moodle. At the very least, you'll have access to the PowerPoint on Moodle. That's it from McDonald's. I hope this was helpful to you guys. And if you have any questions, we can talk about it on Monday at the beginning of class, or you can talk to the TAs, in particular Mr. Baker, who is very graciously helping me out by showing you this video. Hope you guys are doing well. Blessings to you. Take care.